Плотно, плотно сжимаемся, плотно!
The Russians sent several tanks and APCs to attack a Ukrainian village. As they advanced closer, they spread their vehicles in different directions. When they reached the outskirts of the village, they began shelling the Ukrainian defense line. Their goal was simple: confuse the Ukrainian defenders and prevent them from reacting to attacks coming from multiple sides. Within just a few minutes, the armored vehicles reached their positions. Everything seemed to be going according to plan. Meanwhile, on the Ukrainian side, the soldiers were under heavy shelling.
Сука, Кольцов на месте.
On the other side, Russian soldiers on an APC kept moving forward. The APC hit the first mine, then another. Four mines in just a couple of minutes. Surprisingly, the Soviet-era armored vehicle managed to withstand all those Ukrainian mines. Eventually, the APC stopped, but every soldier inside survived, even after a drone struck the front of the vehicle. By that time, they had already reached their intended position. The soldiers quickly jumped out of the APC, took cover, and the assault began. After the heavy attack, Ukrainian soldiers were ordered to retreat. They packed up their equipment and began moving back, carefully navigating the dangerous terrain. But on their way, they noticed a Russian drone lying in wait. They quickly fired, neutralizing the drone, but the constant threat of enemy drones kept them on edge. Despite the heavy shelling from the Ukrainian side, the Ukrainians managed to lay mines to slow the Russian retreat. They tried to secure their ammunition and fire back. But their shots missed under the pressure of incoming fire. Many shelters were burning, forcing the soldiers to leave behind some of their equipment in order to save their lives. But that day, luck wasn't on the Ukrainian side. While carrying 6 soldiers and 1 injured comrade, a Russian drone struck the retreating group. 5 soldiers, including the injured one, were killed instantly. Only 2 soldiers survived, both severely wounded. Forced to flee to save their own lives, they had to leave their fallen comrades behind. This grim reality shows the harshness of the battlefield. Sometimes, despite all effort and bravery, luck simply isn't on your side. Now they were ready to send more soldiers into that area, occupy the village, and eliminate the Ukrainian troops holding that area. The Russian soldiers pushed into the trenches, firing non-stop as they crawled and dragged themselves forward. The 3 men who had just climbed out of the APC were firing relentlessly, barely giving the Ukrainians a second to react. Under this overwhelming barrage, the Ukrainian soldiers became confused. The sound of gunfire echoed from every direction, and they mistakenly fired toward the wrong side. The Russians were attacking from a different angle, almost right in front of them, but hidden by the chaos. In the middle of this, 1 Russian shot struck a Ukrainian soldier's helmet. Stunned, the soldier dropped down and crawled back as fast as he could, barely managing to save his own life. With the trenches collapsing into panic and no clear line of sight, the Ukrainian soldiers had no choice. They pulled back and fled to survive. This is the harsh truth of war. Sometimes, survival means retreat. Now the Ukrainian soldier had managed to pull away from the Russians in the trenches, but the danger wasn't over. They were still under constant surveillance. Russian FPV drones were circling above, watching every movement, ready to strike if the soldiers made even a small mistake. One wrong step could cost them their lives. Moving through heavy Russian gunfire, the retreating Ukrainians had to follow every word from their commander. His voice over the radio was the only guide that could lead them out of this deadly zone.
Давай, Чепа, дай допомогу. Трох, іди забирайте його. Що там? Не треба, дали. Забирайте втрох! Быстро в окоп!
Двинулась, у меня инженер ранен в ногу. Мы чуть-чуть продвигаемся, сейчас это Тулю потом.
Сонечка, 1-300. 3 человека его понесло, у него брюшное ранение. Передайте нам медевак, пусть встречают в окопе. Да идем, блядь, как шли! Идем, как шли, чё? Ну, то идем, блядь, что делать?
Пацаны, доползли туда.
Ползем, ползем! Прикрывай! Здорово!
Здорово.
Это наша, блядь. Пацаны, я кидаю гранату. 2 человека, двигайте сразу туда. У меня есть.
But even during the retreat, an FPV drone exploded near their position. Debris slammed into one of the Ukrainian soldiers, causing sharp pain, but he pushed forward.
Гранату закидывай. И давите огнем. Давите постоянно огнем. Одиночкой. Граната! Граната!
There was no time to stop. They continued crawling and shifting carefully across the open ground, trying to reconnect with their base area through radio contact.
И тебя тоже надо гонять, давай.
На дальней траншеи бить!
Давай.
Проходим, по Питеру убегают!
Проходим! Пошли, блядь!
That's when they learned the worst news. More Russian troops were already entering the same zone. Any movement now had to be slow, silent, and precise.
Так, я штаны поправлю побыть.
Надо продвинуться, продвиньтесь, просуньте типов, нет никого, покидай гранат, я возьму БК, придем постреляемся.
The Russian soldiers on the other side were firing non-stop. Bullets cut through the air, grenades were tossed blindly toward the Ukrainians, and the ground shook from explosions. It felt as if the Russians were trying to wipe out every last one of them. At this moment, it truly felt like their lives hung on a thin thread, a thread held only by luck and their ability to stay invisible under fire. Their fate depended entirely on whether the Russian soldiers would spot them next. But the Ukrainian strategy was simple: circle around and attack the Russian soldiers from another angle. It was the only way to survive under such heavy pressure.
Все цели! Да, точно!
As they tried to reposition, the Russians quickly threw a grenade toward the Ukrainian side. The explosion shook the ground, but the Ukrainian soldiers managed to pull back just in time, barely escaping the blast. Now the mission became even more delicate. Every movement had to be slow and calculated. If any soldier stood up to fire directly at the Russian positions, they would immediately become a target. The Russians were locked in, watching every direction, ready to shoot at anything that moved. Meanwhile, Russian FPV drones were still circling above them, constantly surveilling the entire area. The soldiers could hear the buzzing from above, a constant reminder that they were not safe for even a second.
Пацаны, я кидаю гранату. 2 человека двигайтесь сразу туда. У меня есть.
After crawling through the dirt and debris, they finally reached a temporary hiding spot, a small patch of cover that allowed them to breathe for a moment. But even then, the danger wasn't gone. They pushed forward and entered another trench, hoping it would give them more protection. But the reality of the battlefield hit them again. Even inside the trench, the threat wasn't over. The Russians were still close, the drones were still watching, and the mission was far from finished.
Граната!
The Russians eventually pushed through and reached the exact path where the Ukrainian soldiers were positioned. It turned into one of the hardest close combat moments of this entire operation. The fighting was brutal, chaotic, and extremely dangerous. Due to the heavy injuries and the amount of blood shown in the real footage, we cannot display the direct moment when the Ukrainian soldiers were hit. It violates safety guidelines, but what we can show is what happened right after. Despite the intensity, the Ukrainian soldiers somehow managed to pull back from that deadly spot. They crawled, ran, and dragged each other away from the heaviest fire, doing everything they could to stay alive. Moments later, a Ukrainian APC rushed to the scene for rescue. Under constant threat from drones and Russian fire, the APC crew pulled the injured comrades on board and tried to secure the area long enough to save as many lives as possible. The injured soldier was quickly loaded onto the APC, and the crew immediately began giving him first aid support. We had to blur the footage due to the amount of blood and visible wounds. It was far too graphic to show directly, but even after saving him from the front line, Luck still wasn't on the Ukrainian side that day. The situation remained unstable, the enemy was still advancing, and the danger around them was far from over.
Зверху накидуй тут. Ви оцю хуйню доставай.
Fighters from the 3rd SOF Regiment Brigade shared footage from the Pokrovsk direction, where they were suddenly chased by a group of Russian soldiers. The Ukrainian fighters immediately pulled back and took cover inside a nearby building, using it as an ambush point. They stayed low, moved room to room, because there was always a possibility Russian troops were already hiding inside. Soon, the Russian soldiers approached the building. The moment they came close, a Ukrainian sniper fired the first precise shot. One Russian soldier instantly went down. The remaining 2 tried to flee on foot, but within seconds, both of them were also neutralized by accurate sniper fire. One more Russian soldier attempted to retreat farther away, but he was tracked, spotted, and eventually taken down as well. After confirming visual hits, Ukrainian soldiers stepped out from the building and slowly moved across the area to make sure no one was pretending to be dead.
Що ти займай, я даю. Пущай говорять.
They checked pockets and equipment, searching for radios, phones, or maps that could reveal enemy plans.
Дійки нема.
They didn't find communication devices, but they did recover notebooks and maps, useful information for future operations. While returning back, they noticed a Russian drone placed on the ground, likely waiting in standby mode. The Ukrainians quickly reacted, cutting its wires and firing at it, neutralizing the drone before it could activate. It did not explode, but the threat was removed, and that was enough. This is how the 3rd SOF Regiment successfully carried out this short but effective operation in the Pokrovsk direction. In another combat moment, a close face-to-face firefight broke out between Russian soldiers and Ukrainian troops. Russian forces were firing continuously toward the Ukrainian positions, and both sides were only a few meters apart. Ukrainian soldiers were holding the line from inside their trenches, while the footage itself was recorded from a GoPro mounted on a Russian soldier's helmet. Footage later captured by Ukrainian forces after the fight. During this clash, Ukrainian FPV drones suddenly began circling the Russian soldiers. Instead of continuing to shoot toward the trenches, the Russian fighters desperately turned their rifles toward the drone. They fired magazine after magazine, trying to shoot it down before it reached them, but they couldn't stop it. Just moments later, the FPV drone exploded near one of the Russian soldiers. The blast sent debris directly into him, causing severe pain and serious injury. He could barely stand, and the heavy shock left him almost unable to fight back. Under constant fire and with drones striking from above, the Russian soldiers started pulling back.
Меня уебало? Уебало. Уебало мне. Брось, пидорас.
They were unable to continue advancing and could barely walk due to the heavy damage. And this is the raw reality of the battlefield. You don't always face danger from one direction. Sometimes the attack comes from every side at once.
Ага, нога целая. Нога целая. Куда уходим? Где?
Soldiers trying to hide under damaged vehicles. Drones circling above them, sudden explosions, and then silence. Many Russian soldiers have been hit in similar situations, and many Ukrainian soldiers have also fallen in other moments. The war has turned into a place where every position is temporary, every shelter can be targeted, and every movement can be seen from above within seconds. Since the first months of this war, Russia pushed hard, and despite losing a huge number of armored vehicles and manpower, they still managed to capture large parts of eastern Ukraine, especially in areas like Donetsk, Luhansk, and parts of Zaporizhzhia. From the outside, it might look strange that a country can lose so many soldiers and tanks and still continue its advance. But modern warfare has changed in a way where heavy losses don't always stop operations. Russia has large stockpiles, older equipment, and a big manpower pool, and that has allowed them to keep pressing forward and hold many positions even while taking serious losses. Ukraine, on the other hand, has been fighting with limited resources compared to Russia, but they have adapted. One of the biggest changes has been the use of modern equipment and modern tactics. Ukraine receives support not only from European countries, but also training, technology, armored vehicles, and powerful systems that have helped them hold positions and sometimes retake territory that was lost in the earlier months of the invasion. In many operations, foreign volunteer units and trained specialists have helped Ukrainian forces carry out missions that would have been very difficult earlier in the war. Another major change on the battlefield is that drones are everywhere now. They are used to search, target and attack vehicles, trenches, and soldiers. These small systems are cheaper than tanks, but have the power to destroy expensive vehicles in a matter of seconds. Because of drones, modern battles are no longer only decided by heavy armored vehicles or traditional artillery. The side that sees first and strikes faster often has the advantage. Even if they have fewer soldiers or fewer tanks. That's why today, the battlefield looks more unpredictable and more dangerous than any traditional ground war we saw in past decades. Both Russia and Ukraine have suffered heavy losses, and both sides continue to push forward in different areas. Russia still holds important regions inside Ukraine and keeps trying to expand those areas step by step. Ukraine still launches counter-operations and uses modern systems. Night strikes, long-range attacks, and special missions to take back land wherever possible. The situation changes month by month. Sometimes faster, sometimes slower. But what stays the same is that each side continues to fight, even after serious losses. When you look at the bigger picture, you notice something important: losing vehicles, losing armored carriers, and even losing soldiers has sadly become part of the daily reality in this war. This doesn't mean these losses are small or not important, but it shows how brutal and long this conflict has become. In the past, even losing a single tank in a battle could be a major event. Today, both armies lose equipment every day. Sometimes, several vehicles are destroyed in just a few minutes, and the battle continues as if nothing unusual happened. This tells us how intense and constant the fighting has become. What we are watching now is a war that keeps evolving. At one point, tanks were controlling villages. At another point, infantry units were clearing trenches.
Боком за мене, покажи ручку. Сюди?
Я просто вона замінила.
Now drones are guiding fire, destroying armored vehicles and stopping convoys even before they reach the front line. Every month adds a new layer to how this war is being fought. And both sides try to adjust and survive under these new conditions. And yet, even after thousands of destroyed vehicles and after so many casualties, Russia still continues its military push. Many believed that such high losses would force Russia to slow down, but instead, they have kept moving forward using older equipment, bringing more personnel, and relying on numbers when technology is not enough. At the same time, Ukraine keeps planning new operations, receiving international support, and trying to retake the land that is still under Russian control.
At the moment. So New York, Torets, Korolivka is where they're firing most of their large artillery from. So margin is about it, right? But if you just stay there, your chances of getting hit exponentially increases because they can just adjust onto your position. Yeah. If you just fucking keep moving, they're like, fuck's sake.
That is why the front keeps shifting, and the fighting continues without any clear end. This is the reality today. Where losses don't immediately stop attacks, where destroyed vehicles don't always mean retreat, and where every small position on the map requires enormous effort from both sides. A war where modern technology and traditional forces mix together in a way we have never seen before. And as long as both sides believe they can still change the situation, this war will continue shaping the region, village by village, road by road, and day by day. And now, what you're about to see is another example of how fast the situation can change. There's a moment where a Ukrainian F-16 spots a large Russian convoy and strikes it before those vehicles can even reach the front. If you want to understand how modern air power is changing this war, you should definitely watch that video next, because it shows another side of this conflict that is becoming more important every single day.